Why do high integrity entrepreneurs have so much resistance to making sales? Our guest today is Justin Janowski. He is the founder of Faith to Influence, and he has helped hundreds of coaches turn their passion into a profitable business venture. And I'm really excited to have him here today. We're going to talk about high integrity sales strategies, pricing, how to optimize your business model. So you can really make more income as you increase your impact. Justin, welcome to the Laser Transformation. We're glad you're here.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole. I'm
It,
happy to be
it
here.
it is a pleasure. It is a pleasure. And just do want to shout out to Command Your Brand, Rebecca, who connected us. You know what? I just so appreciate all the amazing booking agencies and consultants that are out there that continue to send us amazing, amazing guests. So thank you to all of them. And in particular, again, Command Your Brand has been awesome in connecting us to Justin and making this interview possible. So, Justin, let's dive in and just talk about your passion for working with coaches, sales. Where did that all begin for you?
Well, it really began when I was 18. Believe it or not, I opened a newspaper. I had to be one of the last people to do this. And I was searching for a summer job between high school and college, and I ended up selling Cutco kitchen knives. And it was an in-home presentation, direct sales company. And a lot of people think that stuff is weird, but I loved it. And I learned sales and entrepreneurship there. And then I went on into financial planning and did some business to business sales. And eventually I hired a couple of coaches. I worked with Hal Elrod. I worked with Ben Skemper later. And my experience working with them really exposed me to that opportunity and what coaching could be and what kind of impact it could have for people. And I, at some point, realized that's what I wanted to do. And so I decided to leave my job and start a coaching business. Shortly thereafter, Ben, who was coaching me at the time, said, we could use a salesperson. Like, why don't you do this with us as a startup company? And I became the first sales rep there. And I sold a couple $1 million worth of coaching packages there. And then eventually felt like it was time for me to go all in on my own business at Faith to Influence. And so I left and launched this business. And originally, Faith to Influence was a Christian men's group, but it took off so quickly. And we collected over $250,000 in revenue the first year in business that some of the men I was working with happened to be coaches or wanted to launch coaching businesses and asked me questions. And as I started working with them, I found that that was really compelling to me. And that was really my zone of genius. And so we switched over to working specifically with coaches. Christian coaches is our primary focus a couple of years ago, men and women now. And that's just a really fun group for me to work with. I think sales is fun when done right. I think it's loving when done right. I think it's exhilarating. And so I've always loved it. But in this space, it's even more fun because of the impact that our sales have on the people that we end up working with.
You know, it's funny because I've interviewed a lot of people on this show and we've had some amazing conversations about business and transformational and it's so interesting how many of them started out in a sales role. You know, I
Mm.
know I started out in sales and you talk about starting out in a sales job. A lot of times we think of those things as like, oh, I don't want to do that. I want to do the important thing. And sales is a foundational
Mm.
skill. One of my mentors, I remember, said that sales is the number one skill in business and in life
Yeah.
because sales is about communication and it's about connecting with another person and understanding what their needs are and how to meet their needs and all of that. And so, what a great foundation for build. We talk about impact, creating impact in the world. You can't impact somebody who you don't have influence with, and you can't have influence if you're not quote unquote selling. I mean, selling is maybe talk about that. Like, what is selling from your perspective?
Yeah, for me, sales is simply making it as easy as possible for the right people to say yes. And if we're selling a great product or service, sales is helping people get more of what they want or become more of who God created them to become. But again, we need to recognize where our responsibility ends and theirs begins to make the decision. And so if we want to reframe it, making it as easy as possible for the right people to say yes. It can also feel, especially for a coach, a sales call can feel like coaching with an invitation at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about even like from a sales perspective, from we're first of all we're selling ourselves, right?
Mhm.
We got to sell ourselves on what we're doing. We got to believe in what we're doing. And then even like employees, I mean, you have employees, people that work for you. You had to sell them on the idea. So, I just want to broaden that perspective for people that may be listening and saying sales is not just the transaction. It's actually more than a transaction anyway, it should be, but it's more than that, just selling something and having money exchange hands. Um, it's so much more than that. And with that, we're going to talk about selling with integrity. Let's
Mhm.
define also another word, which is integrity. What is
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, integrity to me is honesty, it's transparency, it's having both people's interest in mind. Like when I think about integrity in sales, I believe in win-win or no deal. It's got to be an
I like that.
absolute win for our prospects. It's got to be an absolute win for us because some entrepreneurs and coaches are creating I lose, you win scenarios with their prospects because they're so afraid of winning at the other person's expense that they'll lose at the other person's expense. But I think integrity in sales is win-win or no deal. And it's honest, it's transparent. It has the best interests of both people at heart at all times.
What is the biggest misconception that coaches have, and in particular, even faith-based coaches that you work with?
Mm. Well, I think faith-based coaches, so many of them have old stories about either sales or money. And those are the misconceptions. And I guess maybe one misconception would be they think, "Oh, I want to be a coach," but they don't realize, "Oh my gosh, I have to make a sale every time I want to coach somebody as a solopreneur." Like when you talk about the important thing or the main thing, it's actually making the sale because it's the only thing that gives us the opportunity. So some people are like, "Oh my gosh, I want to coach, I want to help people. I've got this great skill set." And so the misconception is that they can do that without having to do sales. And then they realize, oh no, what am I going to do? I have to make sales. This doesn't feel so good. But another misconception is that they believe that sales is so different from coaching. And the reality is a great, like our 10-step sales process we teach, and we'll give it to everybody for free later today. But the 10-step sales process, it works just as well for a coaching call as it does for a sales call. The only step that's different is step 10. It's just a great influence process that helps people realize where they're at, what they really want, what the problem is that stands in the way, and helps them commit to solving that problem. At that point, we put together a plan to solve it. And that can be in a coaching call, step one, step two, step three, what kind of actions are they going to take? But on a sales call, it might be, hey, here's part of the plan to solve this. I can help you through our program. And so I think that people get stuck on what sales is. And I think they think it has to be pushy, it has to be sleazy, it has to be dishonest, or somebody has to lose, or it has to, there's greed or something like that necessarily in it. But I don't think that's true. I think sales in general might be one thing, or this old story or misconception you have about sales might be one thing, but sales with you is something totally different. I had a client, Laura Nizer, who told me her old story about sales is pushy. And I said, Laura, are you pushy? She said, no, no, I'm not. That's why I can't do sales. I said, okay, well, if we put you on a sales call, would you then be pushy? She said, no, no, it's just not for me. I can't do that. It's okay. So if you wouldn't be pushy on a sales call, how would you be? And she said, well, I'd show up in the service mindset. Like I'd show up to serve. I said, okay, then with you, is sales with you pushy? And she said, well, I guess not. And I said, what is sales with you? She said, sales with me is service. And she had this new story, and that made it easier and more fun for her to engage with it. And so we just need to remember whatever sales has been in other people's hands doesn't need to be what it is in ours. Sales with me can be loving. Sales with me can be coaching. Sales with me can feel like leadership. And it can be really, really honest and transparent.
Well, you bring up a really good point. I think that in that process of being in the sales conversation, that when you are of service
Mhm.
and you are helping someone, helping them identify a need, there is that 10 step, there is that call to action
Mhm.
to make the sale, to close the sale. And I think that's where people get afraid, become afraid. I had somebody years ago who said to me, he says, oh, you know what I realize? I'm not in sales. So I was in direct sales
Mhm.
many, many years ago, and he was on our team, and I love him. He's a great guy, big, big heart, and he was like, I'm not in sales, I'm an educator. I educate people. And I said, honestly, that is where your problem is, because
Yeah.
you are educating people and
Mhm.
letting people know this is some great information, but you're not taking it to the next step of offering them the solution. Here, how about this?
Yeah.
And so, it's a shift in mindset. And I saw that in him, and he ended up becoming a great salesperson, doing it his way,
Mm.
being authentic, being a service-minded person, and became really, really successful at it when that shifted it for him. So talk about that. And how do you help people? And even like strategically, how do you do that? Right? Like, how
Yeah.
do you take it from serving, identifying the issue and all that, and then moving it into that, okay, well, here's the recommendation. I mean, I know how I do it. I want to hear how you do it.
Yeah. Getting to the end of the sales call.
Yeah.
So if we've identified the problem together that this person needs to solve, and we know the goals that they're after, the vision of what they really want, then the next question is, well, what's going to happen if they don't solve this problem? We call it potential futures. Like, how long have you been dealing with this problem? Like if I'm talking to somebody and they're like, oh man, my biggest problem that stands in the way of me achieving my financial goals in my business is sales. Like I've just struggled with sales. Okay, how long have you struggled with sales? Oh my gosh, since I started. How long have you been in business? 4 years. Okay, so 4 years of struggling with this fear around sales. What would the consequence be of 4 more years operating the way that you have and having the same thoughts, the same belief systems, the same fears around sales that you've had over the last 4 years? Yeah, and how would that feel? And then what would happen? And who else would that affect besides you? Okay, so on the flip side of this, what if you solve this one problem? And instead of sales being something that was scary or hard, what if sales felt really fun and easy and you were really good at it and natural at it? What would be possible for your business then? And then what would happen? And what would you do with that extra income? And how would that feel? And who else would that affect? And so we're working through, there's some leverage in the potential futures of what if they don't solve the problem? What if they do? And then I want to ask a question of commitment. Okay, then this sounds pretty important. How committed are you to solving this problem? We have to help people commit to solving the problem before our offer makes any sense. We can't, as a coach, want it more than our prospect does. But if they're committed to solving the problem, then I might say, okay, cool. If you're committed, I'm really confident I can help. Are you ready to hear how I work with my clients? So I'm going to get consent after that statement of certainty. And then I'm going to make my offer. Then I'm going to say, okay, cool. The way that we work with our clients is like we do this, 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 and this. So I'm going to go through like kind of the details, but also the heart behind it. I really think we can help you achieve this outcome, solve this problem. And that's going to cost this much. Is this something that you'd like to do? And then we wait and we listen. Now, there might be some objections. There might be some concerns. There might be some questions. And I don't want to respond to those with like canned objection handlers or boxing somebody into a corner, but I want to be calm and curious. And I want to be a coach and I want to seek to help people find the truth for them. And so there's a number of different ways we can do this, but an example of this is somebody saying it's too much money. Being like, I totally get it. It is a really big investment. Tell me more about that. That kind of calm, confident curiosity. Tell me more about that. And just like opening the door to it. And then maybe coaching a little bit like, hey, an investment like this should stretch us. It's actually really healthy to be stretched by a coaching investment because that means it means something to us, the financial investment, which means we'll take more considerable action. But being stressed by it to the point that like you're deciding between paying for coaching and paying a bill, paying for coaching and putting food in your mouth, if that's the case, it's not for you. That's stress, not stretch. But if it's just a stretch, it's challenging, it's bigger than what you're used to spending on these sorts of things. That's you planting a flag and saying, this is really important. Maybe I can work through this. So there's something there. I'll give one more example and then give you a chance to respond to this long monologue. But the other one would be like somebody saying, well, I need to talk to my spouse, especially if it's a high ticket offer. I know some people who are like, no, you close the deal on that call no matter what. That's not my value system. I would talk to my spouse about a big decision like this too. That's what I'm going to say. I totally get it. I'd talk to my wife about something like this as well. Let me ask you a question though. Have you made your decision for you yet? If he says, whatever you think, babe, I trust you. Do you know what you want to do? That's helping them like take ownership and trying to figure out if there's another objection. So these kinds of curious, calm, confident ways of responding really help people make a good decision.
I love those questions. And when you said stretch or stressed, that is so good
Yeah.
because I think a lot of people, and I've had recent conversations with some coaches that struggle with that. Like, how do I know when that's a legitimate objection or whether or not it's there's something going on underneath the surface, right? And
Yeah.
differentiating that is really good. And even just to say that, I think part of what I'm hearing too in the way that you approach it is integrity is being honest and open and not trying to just have all the scripts. I find
Mhm.
scripts don't work anyway. They don't
Mhm.
feel good. They don't work. I joke sometimes with my experience and when I started out, I read some books on sales and heard some people talk about sales and they said, well, when they say this, you say this, and then you say this. And I had my flow chart. I remember being on the call and, I was like, okay, I have my flow chart. This is how I'm going to follow it. And my prospects didn't follow scripts. Right.
Mhm.
And so it's like immediately I'm lost and I'm like,
Right.
this isn't going to work for me. And so I just threw that out and started having conversations. So
Mhm.
what I'm hearing, what you're saying is that it's being honest with people. It's saying, yeah, like this or this. Yeah, I've had this experience. So you're talking to somebody like kind of like you would a friend.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's more about asking great questions than it is about having great answers. And so this can take pressure off the coach or the salesperson. Like if we're doing this really well, we're asking people great questions and we're really curious. We're going 2 or 3 layers below the surface. Why is that so important to you? Tell me more about that. How long has that been going on? This is where the leverage to act is, and this is where people find their own answers. And so again, my job isn't to make them say yes or to manipulate. And the only sales scripts where the prospect says exactly what you want to say and it actually works like a script or things where we're backing them into a corner, like the solar salesperson who says, do you like the environment? Do you like saving money? If you could save money and protect the environment, would you do it? I mean, like these kinds of things where you're trying to script their answer ahead of time by asking yes or no questions. If we're willing to be open, we might have like a structure. I believe in a structure. We've got a 10-step process, but inside of that structure, just to your point, it's a conversation. And yeah, we want to be honest. We want to ask good questions. We want to be curious. We want to, like any great coach, ask questions that help people find their truth. And then, make it safe for them to move forward and take real action.
So earlier you were talking about stories and the story that we tell ourselves about what sales is and what we don't want to be. How do you help people to rewrite their story? You shared an example,
Yeah.
but if we were to unpack that a little bit more, so
Yeah.
that our listeners can even like say, hey, you know what? I got to start. I got to first identify the story, and then I got to do something with it.
Yeah, you're exactly right. The first step is identifying the story. It's having an awareness of the story that's been playing in the background because many of us never pause to consider it. It's just an unconscious thing. A story some faith-based Christian leaders have about money is that money's the root of all evil. The Bible, where they're misquoting, actually says the love of money is the root of all evil. And it's making an idol of it. It's making it the most important thing. It's allowing it to consume us. Of course, that's not good. And we've seen a lot of bad things happen in the world in pursuit of money, right? But that doesn't have to be our story. If our old story was money is the root of all evil, then we might write that old story down, get it from the big place it's taken up in our head into a small piece of paper. Money is the root of all evil. And then if we consider it and it's not completely true for us, we might just draw a line through it, cross it off. And next to it, write in all capital letters, not true, and then write the true, more empowering story underneath. So for me, my story is the more I earn, the more money I earn, the more money I can give. My wife and I have always given 10 to 20%. I'd love to give a higher percentage than that if God continues to bless us more and more. And I know that the more I earn, the more jobs I create, the more people I help in my community, the more I tithe in my church. We put a certain amount of money in our church every month in tithe and a certain amount in a giving account that we just have available. So when somebody says we need something, or somebody has a GoFundMe, or somebody in our neighborhood or our community is hurting, and we figure out that something's going on, even a client, if I have a client who's going through something really hard, we can generously bless them and give from that account. And so if we put things like that in place, well, the money in our hands doesn't have to be something evil or bad. It can be a tool for good. I think everybody consciously knows that, but going through this process of writing the old one down, crossing it off, like acknowledging that's not true for me, and writing the true story underneath, the more I earn, the more I can give. Money is a tool for good, or whatever that story is for you. that can start to shift and change the story. Now, of course, if we want to really like have this sink in deep into our conscious brain and we want it to be a soundtrack, the new story instead of the old one, we might need to read that over and over and over again, write it down over and over and over again, make it part of our morning routine or our evening routine until it sticks.
I love that. Let's talk pricing because I know this
Yeah.
is an issue that comes up a lot, and
Yeah.
especially in the area of coaching is, this high ticket coaching or, people saying, "Oh, I can charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for my service. That's the value, of course, with the ROI and everything." And then other coaches are like, "Oh, I don't feel integral to do that." And so they discount their prices. You talked a little bit earlier about exchange, and it has to be a win-win for everybody. How do you help coaches? I know you work with new coaches
Yeah.
or newer. How do they price their offering and then know when to increase it if that's
Hmm.
relevant, or do they start high? Just give us a little bit of insight on that from
Yeah.
your
Those are
perspective.
really good questions. Okay. So one thing I don't really love is the arbitrary price point. And I've had
Mm-hmm.
some clients come to me and be like, I want to make a $25,000 program. And they want it to be $25,000 regardless of what they put into it. Or people who just they maybe design first and like, okay, I'm gonna give this, this, and this. I think that's 5,000 or that's 10 or that's 50. And they just come up with a random, somewhat arbitrary number. And I get that. That's probably all that they know to do because they're not sure what else to do. So what we've done is some market research, working with so many coaches. We do work with new coaches between 0 and 100K in annual revenue and help them like really launch and build consistent businesses. But then we also get hired by 7 and 8 figure coaches regularly to do what I call partnership sales, their conferences, their events, or on an ongoing retainer basis. So we've seen a lot of offers. I've seen a lot of offers. So I kind of put together like a chart that says, here's the range of what most coaches, not Tony Robbins, who's maybe charging $1 million for a one-on-one coaching call, but most coaches who are between 0 and $10 million in annual revenue. Here's the range of what they're typically valuing certain pieces of a program at. And so if we take a look at like one-on-one coaching, I call it your signature offer. You're looking at one-on-one coaching, that could be part of it, maybe not. Group coaching, that could be a part of it. Live events, that could be a part of it. Courses, that could be a part of it. Immersive one-on-one days and things like that that people sometimes do. And there's so many different things that you could include. But if you took a look at what people oftentimes include in these different programs, we ask the question of, does this part sound fun or heavy for me? If it sounds fun, let's include it in our program. If it sounds really heavy and you're a new coach, just don't do it. You don't have to do it because that's what your coach did or somebody else did. Let's make sure that we design a program that we're going to love being a part of. That's really important because you're the only one who's going to be doing this forever. Your client's going to come and go, but you're the one person who will be in your program forever. So we need to design a program that you love the implementation of. But then we look at each piece. So like one-on-one coaching calls. For new to intermediate coaches, these are usually valued between $200 and $1,000 in the marketplace. Again, there are people charging $1 million for a one-on-one coaching call, but 200 to 1,000 is a pretty common range for new to intermediate coaches. So if we put that range out there, then we can say, okay, this is normal. Inside of that range, what's my call worth? And that might be based on your experience level. And maybe you're at the lower or the higher end of that. It might be based on your audience of who you're working with. It might be a choice about who you want to be in the marketplace. Are you the economy option or are you the luxury option? Both of them have great value to the marketplace. And so you can kind of decide. And so if I'm working with a coach and they're going to include one-on-one in their program, and they say, okay, between 200,000, like, what do you feel like intuitively, like, is your number right now? And they're like, okay, $500 per call. Okay, great. Then what frequency do you want to offer these one-on-one calls at? And how long is your program? This is not some a la carte thing. It should probably be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. I like 6 or 12. If it was a 12-month program and they wanted to meet with their prospects every other week, because that would be fun for them and good for their prospects, win-win, 26 calls for the year, then at $500 each, that's $13,000 worth of value. If you were just going to be a one-on-one coach, like, okay, my program is 26 one-on-ones a year. It's $13,000 worth of value. And then you might knock that price down 20 to 60%. I see some people make an offer where they're like, oh, this is worth $113,000 and we're going to give it to you for 30,000, or we're going to give it to you for 10 or something like that. And I just never believe that. It actually makes me lose trust with them. It makes it sound like they're not honest. But if it was 13,000, you might say, I'm going to sell this for 10,000. And if you want to split it up monthly, it's $1,000 a month or 12K for the year. I kind of like 2 months free in a 12-month program if you were going to allow monthly options to pay in full as an incentive. In a 6-month program, 1 month off to pay in full. So I would do the same thing with each of the other pieces, like the group call, the live event. What's the range of what the market's charging for this? Where do I fit inside of that range? Can I come up with a value stack that's honest, that says this is what all of these things are really worth individually? And this is the price. When you buy it in bulk, you're getting all these things, you get a discount. I'm happy to do it for this much. So that's what I look at from a pricing perspective. And one other thing I'll note here, well, I'd like to note two more things. One, I know you're letting me have the floor. Thank you. I know I'm talking,
I love
but
this. This is great. This is
okay.
perfect.
I like to give meat, like not just
Yes.
like, ideas, but like here's real things you can act upon. Is when I'm thinking about pricing, um, the two things I wanted to add are if you're a brand new coach and you put together this value stack and you're like, okay, my program's worth, by the way, most group programs, mastermind programs, signature offers in the marketplace are between 5 and 30K overall price point. If you end up designing one and you're like, okay, that's $10,000, but in your mind, you're like, I don't know how I could ever say $10,000 out loud. Like you're panicking. So for some people, even 5,000, they're like, oh my gosh, I could never, how could I say that? Then I think it's reasonable to consider cutting your price in half for a specified first few clients. So you might say the first 3 clients, just to get some confidence, say a price out loud I feel a little bit more comfortable with, and to tell them the program's $10,000, but for my first 3 clients, it's $5,000 because I'm going to really like rely on you to give me feedback and testimonials and help me grow this thing. I think that's okay as long as you have a number like 3 and you do not cross that number with the same price. Now, if you needed to, you could have a plan of 3 people at 5,000 and the next 3 at 7,500, and then you're up to your $10,000 price or something like that. If you had to, but you should design the real program at a real price that's fair for you and your prospects. But if you had to like have a step up process to it, you could. And the final thing I'll say about pricing is for me personally, this doesn't have to be for everybody. I don't like the marketplace pricing of like everything being $97 at the end instead of the real price, like knocking that $3 off. So the $10,000 program being $9,997, the $20,000 program even being $19,997. It just feels to me like slightly dishonest in marketing, like we're trying to trick people. Now, most people do it. Anybody who's listening who has 97 at the end of their price, that's fine. I know that's not your intention. It's just my perspective. And I want people to take this as like evaluate all the things you see people doing and say, is that right for me or not? For me, if I'm going to sell a $10,000 program, I'd rather say 10K than 9,997. And additionally, if somebody would buy it because of that $3 marketing trick that's been there for years and years and years as a threshold, if they would buy it at 9,997, but not at 10K, I don't want the sale. That's the person who's going to struggle to make payments. That's the person who might try to cancel early or have buyer's remorse. I want easy sales that are people are going to be excited to work in this program. So if it's 10K, I want them to know it's 10K. I don't want some kind of marketing tactic that's going to help them think something else. I also don't want to like say this offer closes Sunday at midnight and you'll never be able to have it again. And then it goes up to the $10,000, full price instead of the 5K I was offering you now. That expires on Sunday. When most people who say that at like a conference, like this is for the conference only, if you call them next week with your credit card for their 20K offer, they're all accepting that credit card at 20K. They're not going to the $10,000 higher price point of 30K. It's false urgency. I think urgency can be a really helpful tool, but only when it's honest. So those are the kinds of things I'm looking at to be really transparent and honest in sales, and for sales to feel like it has integrity and feels good. Honest, transparent pricing, honest, transparent urgency offers, and not saying or doing anything that's placing the priority on the sale over truth or reality or what's best for the other person.
So that totally resonates with me. I love that. And it's such a breath of fresh air because this idea of the false urgency. And I've said that to people where I say, look, if you do that, you've got to be willing to honor that. If you're going
Mm-hmm.
to say that it's done by
Mm-hmm.
Sunday at whatever time, then that's when it's over. If you say it's only going to be at this event, then it has to be only at this event.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's so much that we can talk about here, but I think about integrity starts like the sales, starting with ourselves. Integrity, if we don't believe ourselves, if we don't know that we're being honest and true, even like whatever's happening, regardless of what's happening with them, it's going to affect us in
Mm-hmm.
our business and the confidence that we have in our business if we know we're not being honest. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's so important that for us that we're in integrity. And then of course that also spills over because people may not recognize consciously that we're not being, honest, but subconsciously something will be off. And
Yeah.
so it's so important. I do want to talk to you while we have you here is to talk about your ideal client. How do
Mm-hmm.
you, and I know, you primarily you focus on sales, but in order for you to get the right people on the call who can make the right
Mm-hmm.
decision, this is kind of going into marketing, but this ideal client profile where people who want to, and I see this a lot where coaches want to work with everybody because they want to help everybody. How do you help them to narrow down?
Yeah.
And do you believe that they can have multiple avatars? Kind of give us your perspective on that with you from your experience.
Well, I'll say this. The entrepreneur, the solopreneur can always decide for themselves. So I'm going to give my recommendation, but of course there's exceptions to every rule. So you can decide what I would say. And that's where like, again, you can charge 97, 997, 9997. Like that's fine if that's your choice. But I want everyone to consider these different things. What I know from a business perspective works best as far as target marketing is to have a more narrow niche. When we have a narrow niche, a very specific group of people that we aim to serve, it's much easier to become known inside of that marketplace. And when we solve a very specific and pervasive problem for that group of people, that becomes memorable. It becomes referable. It becomes way easier for people to find us and do business with us. If I was just a general coach for anyone, I probably wouldn't even be on your podcast. What would I talk about on your podcast? What would the message even be? Why would anybody follow up with me? General coaches, I guarantee you there are thousands that are better than me. Now I narrow into a specific problem to solve, which is sales. Now I've eliminated a lot of those coaches. There are fewer people working in the avenue of sales and solving that specific problem. But then I narrow into coaches specifically. How many competitors do I have who are helping coaches with high integrity sales? Not that many. And then I go to Christian coaches and the competition becomes really small. Inside of the avatar of the Christian coach between 0 and 100K in annual revenue, that newer Christian coach on sales focus, I don't know a whole lot of people who are doing that. Most of the listeners probably don't know a whole lot of people who are doing that. And it allows me to become really memorable. That way, if you talk to a Christian coach who's wanting to start their business, they're struggling with sales, I should come to mind immediately. If you talk to somebody who's just talking about like any random thing, oh, yeah, I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying to um, get better at my marriage, or I want to get better at my marketing. If they're talking about anything else and I was just a general coach that you talk to, you wouldn't say, oh my gosh, you need marketing help? You should talk to Justin. Oh, you want to lose weight? You should talk to Justin. Oh, you want to get your marriage better? You should talk to Justin. No, you'll think of the person who helps people lose weight specifically. That's who you would refer that person to. The person who helps people with their marriage specifically, you're going to refer to them. The marketing specifically, you're going to refer to them because that's their area of expertise. The generalist is rarely remembered, they're rarely referred, and they're rarely the best at what they do for their audience because it's not clear what they do. So it makes marketing really difficult, referrals really difficult. But when we become known to a specific group of people for solving a specific problem, we can become synonymous with that problem. One more piece around this is I believe the first thing a new coach should do is write their mission statement. I help blank, do blank, so that blank. Who do you work with? What problem do you solve? And why does it matter? Once we have that, that should be repeated everywhere and everything we do over and over and over and over so that we become memorable, we become remembered, we become referable. So for me, I help Christian coaches optimize their business model, pricing, and sales structures so that they can scale their income and their impact. And then my program is Sales School for Coaches. My podcast is Sales Strategies for Christian Coaches. My Facebook group is Sales Training for Christian Coaches. So you're going to get Christian coaches in sales over and over and over in all of our marketing and everything that we do so that I'm remembered with that group of people for solving that problem. And specifically, if people are going to think of one word, I want them to think of me for sales. I get hired outside of my target market, outside of my niche all the time. In fact, we've never marketed to this partnership sales thing that we do. But Pete Vargas, Ray Edwards, Pedro Deo, John Acuff, Dan Miller, Dr. Darius Daniels, so many really amazing coaches have hired us for that because of word of mouth. Because when people hear sales problem or we need sales help, they think of me first because I've got a specific problem I solve that I get back to again and again and again and again. And it's just the easiest way to build your brand, to get business flowing to you and to make more sales.
Think about what is the one word that you are remembered for. Yeah, it's like sales. Sometimes we think of and some of us are complex in the way we think, and so we think of like long sentences, but it's or elaborate concepts. But like you talk about sales, just being remembered for sales, or in my case, like leadership or whatever. It's like that's what I'm known for. And that's so good. That's so good. And all the auxiliary things that come from that. There's so much that stems from that. That is so, so good. Well, I know you have a gift for our audience. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. And I do want to briefly just state that for anybody who makes a narrow niche, you can still work with somebody outside that niche. I was working with Christian male entrepreneurs in my initial business model and a woman, non-Christian, non-entrepreneur, the marketing CMO. Like she was a friend. She's like, oh, you're coaching? I need a coach. Could you help me? I took her on as a one-on-one client outside of my normal program. You can still take on clients. People will still find you if they're interested. So it's not like you have to say no to everyone else. If a non-Christian wants to go through my sales training, it's just as good for a non-Christian as it is for a Christian. They can come in as long as they're open to me praying for them. But it's very important for us to be clear on who we're focused on. Okay, so the gift today is our coach's playbook. This is like the 10-step sales process, the mindset around sales. A lot of what I talked about today is in a written form in this PDF. We call it the coach's playbook. You can get that at goodsalespdf.com. That gets you on our email list. We'll email you our podcast and other things, and we'll be connected. If you reply to any of those emails, I'll get the reply. goodsalespdf.com.
Fantastic. Justin, thank you so much. And I love what you just said there. The final thought about the avatar is that you don't have to say no to the other people. It's just that you're not investing your marketing dollars. I always think about if you're putting marketing dollars into an area, and if you're, the old saying, right? If you market to everyone, you market to no one. If you're dispersing it, you're not getting the impact of laser focused marketing. And so that's what you're speaking to there. That is that you can work with those other people when they show up, and it's amazing. They show up. And so then you can make a choice what you want to do with that. So this has been so great, power packed, practical, what you can do. And I just absolutely love it. And so thank you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. This was really fun.
It's always a pleasure talking to you. And this was really great. Like I said, I always say that leaders of transformation take action. Take action on something. For those of you listening out there, take action on something that you learned today. Maybe it is asking yourself, and I wrote this down, is this fun or is this heavy? Look at the process. Look at the program that you're looking to offer if you're a coach. And this applies to every other area as well. Look at what it is that you're offering as a service or product and the way that you're doing it. Is it fun or is it heavy? If you're not having fun, don't expect anybody else to be having fun working with you or buying from you. And so even just that, there's so much here. Look at your sales process. Listen to the story that you tell yourself and say, hey, is that working for me? Is that true? And is it working for me? And maybe, there's an opportunity for you to change that and get better results, so there's so much here. This is probably one of those ones you're going to want to re-listen to. I also encourage you that if you know a coach in particular that is struggling in the area of sales, struggling in the area of getting focused on what they're good at and what they're passionate about, their core focus, then share this with them so that they can gain some insights. They can connect with Justin. They can learn more about how to grow their business. And of course, if that is you, check out the information there. We'll make sure all the links are in the show notes to the free gift that Justin has for you. And I just encourage you to take advantage of this. It is so, so valuable. And it will change your life. Now, that'll be you changing it using the material. But it will actually change your life and change your business and the effectiveness and the impact that you're able to have. And so as a leader of transformation, you got to know how to sell, bottom line. So I encourage you to get good at that and be able to make a greater impact in the world like you are capable of and what God is really desiring you to. So with that, thank you for being here. We've enjoyed having Justin here. And next week, we're going to have another amazing guest. We encourage you to come back next week. Until then, have a great day.